Hi everyone, my name is Abhishek and welcome you to my YouTube channel. Today's topic is going to be listeners. So what are listeners? Listeners are the component that shows the results of the samples, which is used for analyzing and reporting results. In case you have not watched the video on how to get started with JMeter, I would suggest you to watch that video if in case you are not aware about this setup. So I am using the existing setup from that video. So if you're already aware, there's no need for that as well. So I have actually three requests created here already, and as mentioned before, we use listeners to see how the requests have performed and what the results are coming. So there are various listeners JMeter tool provides, and we'll try to take a look at most of the available listeners. There are few of the listeners which I've skipped, which comes as more advanced listeners. So we'll not be discussing those, but I believe there are 11 which we'll be discussing here today. Okay. So first thing is you can add listeners uh, even at thread group level, or if you want, you can add it at a sampler level as well. So here if you see, I have added all the listeners in thread group level. Now the simple way to add is you just right click on this, you click on add, and you navigate to this section listener, and here you will be able to see all the listeners, and you can select whichever you want and it will display here. So if I'm adding a listener at thread group level, then whatever the request I have created, like here I have home page, features and demo page, it will give me the results of all these three samplers. But in case I do not want that and I want to add a listener for a particular sampler, then I have to just go to that sampler, right click, click on add, go to listeners, and then whichever listener I want to add. So let's say summary report, I'll click on this and it will get added here. Okay, so these are the two ways you can add listener to your performance test. Now these are the listeners which we are going to cover, so let's get started. uh, Here in the thread group I have mentioned number of users as 2 and ramp up period as 1 second. We will keep changing this when we'll try to understand these different listeners. So I'll first click on this view results tree listener. Okay, so here if you see, uh, in view results tree listener there are different options here. If you want, you can change the name, you can put a comment if you want to. Now here you see we can write the results to a particular file if we want. Now here in case of display, we have the option in case we want to display only errors or successes, and then we have a configure button as well. If you click on this, it will give you the various options in which you can set it up. So let's say this is unchecked and I want to save it as XML. I'll just click on this. If I want to uncheck few of these as per your requirement, you can do that. Okay, so this was about the top section. Coming to this particular section, if you click on this, you'll have different options like the result what you're viewing. You can change it accordingly, like if you want, you can watch see it in HTML, in browser, in XML. We'll take a look at this. So these are the three requests for a website called opencard.com, and this is the features page and this is the demo page. So I'll go to the first listener. In order to run the request, we already know from previous videos. If not, you just click on this particular start button, and if you want to clear, you can click on this clear. This will clear the results of this particular listener. If you want to clear everything, you can click on this. So I'll click on start, and we'll try to validate how to validate the response or how to understand what is going on in the listener. So in case of view results tree, since we have mentioned two users, we'll see that we are getting two requests here. Okay, so home page, features page and demo page. Okay, now coming to home page, you see here it is saying thread group 1 of 1. So that means for the first group, the first user. Okay, this is the sample start time, what time it got started. So today is 8/24/2022 and whatever time it is. Now this is the load time, how much time it took to load this particular request. Okay, now comes the connection time. What is connection time? Connection time is the time which the request takes to connect with the TCP. So I have a definition as well here. It will give more details. So connection time was like little I thought to mention like the few important terms here. So time taken to establish the TCP connection between client and server. So if the particular request is successful, then the client can send further request. If not, cannot talk to the server. So basically it means that how much time it takes to connect to the server. Now coming to latency. Okay, so latency is the time which a particular request takes, like when you send a particular request and you receive a response, the first time when you get a response, that particular time is called latency time. So I have laid it down here in terms of definition as well. So a meter which measures the latency from just before sending the request to just after first response has been received. If this is confusing, we can understand in this way: the time we start getting the first byte of the response is called the latency time, while the connection time is the time which it takes to establish the TCP connection. Now here we will see whatever size in bytes, whatever we sent in terms of bytes, what's the header size in bytes, body size, what is the sample count. There's no error here, that's why it is coming as 0. Data type, what is the response code, response message, all those details will be here. Okay, now if I want to, I can navigate to this particular section, request. Okay, so in case of home page, we were trying to access the home page of this particular website. So you'll be able to see opencard.com, this particular request was sent. Okay, if some headers specifically are there, those details will be mentioned here. Okay, now we'll move to the next section, response data. Okay, now you see the response data is displayed here. Okay, now let's say I want to change it to, let's try to see the major one. So if I click on HTML, okay, so it will display the page something like this. Okay, now let's say I want to change it to, let's say, document. So it will display something like this. If I want to display it like browser, I'll click on this, and whatever the way the page has loaded, that exact page will be displayed here. So if you see here, the page, however the page is displayed. So you can do the settings as per your need, whatever way you want, you can set it accordingly here and get the result. So you don't need to run it again and again. You can just change this here and you'll be able to see the details here. Now in the sampler result, so this particular thing is there, error count is 0. Okay, when exactly error count is going to change? So if this particular request will fail, okay, and request will fail in case of assertion. So if we are trying to validate something, so I've already added an assertion here, and we are able to, like, once we are hitting this particular server, we are getting 200 OK status. So I have just added an assertion saying 201 just to fail this particular request. In case you are not aware how to add assertions, you can just go to your request, right click, add assertions, and whichever type of assertion you want to use. So I have used a response assertion, a pretty simple one. So here you come, and I have clicked on, I am trying to validate the response code, which in this case is 200, and you come here and you mention whatever you want to. So I've added purposefully 201 so that it fails. Okay, I will re-enable this, and I will run this again just to show this particular section. So first I'll clear the results and I'll run this. So now you see this home page is getting failed because we are trying to validate 201 while it is giving 200 status. So here if you'll see, the error count is changed to 1. So this pretty much sums up this particular listener view results tree. Okay, now we will sorry, I forgot to mention this thing. So we can actually have few other things as well, which I explained before, but I'll explain in detail here. So let's say I want only errors to be displayed, so I can just click on this, and since we were getting two errors, now if I rerun this, I'll be only able to see two requests being populated because I only want to display errors. So same way, if I only want to display successes, I can do in that way as well. We'll just skip this one now. You got the idea about how to do this. Now let's say whatever the results are coming, I want to see it in a file. So I can just click on browse here, and I can create any file. Let me create it on my desktop so that we can see what is going on here. So I'll just go to my desktop and I'll just write and I'll click on open. So this is fine. Even if this does not exist, once I'll run, this will create a file. So I'll show you guys. Let me clear this and I will run this again. Okay, so we got all our requests completed, and here if you'll see, this results.csv got generated. Now if I try to open this, let's validate if the details are coming correctly or not. So see here, we are getting all the details: timestamp, elapsed time, label, what is the response code, all those details are getting displayed here. In case you want to add more fields, as we discussed before, you can go into this configure section. If you want to skip something, if you want to add something, you can do the changes accordingly. Okay, so this pretty much sums up this particular listener. So let's move to the next listener, view results in table. In this particular listener, I'll move this to this side. So see, we have two users and we have three requests. Okay, so let me just clear this up so that we are able to see it fresh, and I'll run this. This is asking because this particular listener is trying to run, and we already have the file created. So JMeter gives us an option that do you want to override the existing file or do you want to add the results of the next run. So in this case we can select any option, and here we see that these three samplers requests running 2 times, so that's why we are having 6 samples being displayed here. These are the start time for these samplers, and here if we see in the thread name, this is first user first iteration, first user second iteration. Now for the second request, so here if we see in the label, this is for the home page. Now for the features page, first user first iteration, first user second iteration, same way this one. Now here we see sample time, and this is in milliseconds. How much time this particular sample took. Now in case of status, this is coming as red because we have put a assertion here. Otherwise this will come as green. The status would be okay. So usually in case of assertion only, this particular status would change. Now this is the total number of bytes. Now send byte, these are the bytes which we have sent. Okay, latency, which we talked about it just few minutes before. What exactly is latency? Latency is the time in which we started to get the first response back from the server. And connection time is the time which a particular request takes to connect via TCP to the server. Now the thing which we did here in case of write results to the file configure log display only, This will be applicable to majority of the listeners. So if you see here in view results in table listener, similar thing is displayed here. So if you want to create, we can create a file name and do all those things here. So I'm not going to repeat that, since it is pretty self-explanatory. Now we'll move to the third listener, which is called summary report. Now let me clear this and rerun this. So in case of, so again the same thing, I'll just click like that, append to existing file, and see we have three requests here: home page, features page, and demo page. Okay, so those are coming as the labels here. We are sending two sample requests for each of the requests, so that's why the sample is coming as 2 and here you're getting the total count. Average, this is the average time it took to complete these requests. This is the minimum time it took and this is the maximum time it took. Okay, now standard deviation. So standard deviation comes from the general formula of standard deviation. I'll show that it's a bit complex, but what it means is, let me go to the definition here. So standard deviation is the response time, how the response time is spread around the mean time. So a general thumb rule is we try to validate the smaller the standard deviation or the deviation response time, the application is more consistent. It will depend on the situation as well. Now this is the actual formula which will be used for standard deviation. Now coming to this error percentage, so this particular first request will fail, our assertion is wrong, so both the sample request would fail, so that's why error percentage is 100%. In the other two requests, as we can see, it is 0%. Okay, coming to throughput, what exactly is throughput? So I have mentioned the definition here. Throughput is actually the measure of the request per unit of time. Okay, how we calculate it is the time, the first sample, the time begins when we start to get the first sample to the end of the last one is actually the throughput. It is the amount of transactions which happened over the test duration. So let me explain it here. So we have two sample. Okay, whatever requests are being sent here is being completed. Like if we take a measure of second, in one particular second 1.1 request is getting completed. So that's what throughput means here. This is received kilobytes, whatever we have received back from the server, what we have sent, and this is the average bytes. So this completes summary report. Same thing here, log display if you want to write it, error, successes, configure accordingly. Now we will move to the next listener, aggregate report. Okay, so aggregate report, here we see a similar thing, something like summary report, but it will give you some different information. Okay, so here what difference is there is, it will give you the average time it took to complete the request, the median time. So that means like 50% of the request got completed before this time and 50% of it more than this median. The term explains itself. Now 90% line means that 90% of the request got completed before 1302 milliseconds. Same thing goes with 95% line. So that means before 1302, 95% of the request got completed. And in case of 99%, 99% of the request got completed in this particular time. Now this is the minimum time it took. This is the maximum time it took. Again, the error percentage is 100% here because both of these requests have failed. And this is the throughput as we explained it before. And this is the received kilobyte. And same setup we can do if you want to write the results to a file. We'll move to the next listener, aggregate graph. Okay, so here the same information what we are getting in aggregate report, we get the same results in aggregate graph. However, uh, it gives you the option to see it in a graphical format as well. So here if you see, we have the option to click on display graph, but we have certain columns to display. Right now by default JMeter clicks on average, so I'll just show you the by default graph. If I click on this, I'll be able to see the graph something like this, and this shows that home page, aggregate time, feature page, demo page. But let me go back to the settings, and here let's say I'll click on median. I'll click on 90%, 95% line, 99%, min, max. So how it shows is average will be showed in red color, median blue color, and accordingly these colors are being showed here. And all those settings are below as well if you want to change the font and etc. Now if I click, it will show me all these details. Okay, so see, now it is showing that for this particular request home page, these all colors will display in a graphical format. So basically aggregate graph is graphical representation of aggregate report in addition to what aggregate report displays. Now coming to assertion results. Okay, so what happens in assertion results, listener? It gives us the details of what happened with the assertion. Okay, so since we have used the assertion here, it is giving us the details that the test got failed. Code expected to contain 201. The code which we are getting is 200. Okay, but we have put an assertion here to validate 201. That's why it is saying that both of these failed. If a particular sampler or the request is not running into error, it will just display it like this. So this is basically useful only when we have few assertions or some assertions exist in our sample request. Okay, now there is another assertion. This again is one assertion, this again is one listener comparison assertion visualizer, which is specifically meant for assertions only. So there is one assertion, again the same way, right click here, go to add, go to assertions, and you can add compare assertion. So this particular assertion is specifically for compare assertion. If this is not added, then this is not going to display anything. So I have actually added it, I have disabled, I'll re-enable it again, and I'll just quickly show it here. So if I run this, and what exactly this particular listener does is, so see here, we have a particular details coming out as to what data we are getting, okay, in a certain format. Okay, what it does is, this is comparing our feature page, this particular page, with the home page. So in few cases it becomes very easy if you want to compare certain things, so it, you'll be able to like scroll this and able to validate it side by side. So that's why this is used majorly. Okay, now I'll move to the next assertion, next listener, sorry, graph results. Okay, so here if we see, in graph results we have four options: data, average, median, deviation, and throughput. We have talked about these things, whatever is the median, average, throughput, deviation. Now uh, this is displaying with this particular colors. Okay, we are not able to see the colors like this particular graph in that much clear way because the user load is very less. So I'll do one thing, I'll just put an infinite loop here and we will go to graph results just to see how this performs. So I'll run this, and see now the colors are getting displayed, and then after a certain time it will display a more clearer picture. So this is actually useful only when you have a good amount of user load existing. So I will manually stop this. We will move to the next listener, response time graph. Okay, so how much uh, how much response time the requests are taking. I will clear this and I'll run this again, because last time we put it on infinite, and I will just, so this is running, let it get completed. So once it gets completed, we will click on display graph. So what exactly it will do is it will show us uh, as to as a graph with the response time, like how much time it takes to response to a. So sorry, I have not clicked on this, so I'll just click on this. I'll stop. That's why it was not working. So let me go to response time graph, clear this, run this again, and this should get completed pretty soon. So here we can see that the request is still running. Let me just see. Okay, I clicked on this, but this did not go through, or okay. Let me. Okay, so the loop count was deleted. That's why it was by default clicking on that. I will save this and I'll go to again the graph results. Sorry, the response time graph, and I will run this. So okay, so this got completed. You just click on this display graph, and this is going to display us the home page, features page, and the demo page. Okay, we are able to see dots here. Let me change it to the num bigger number of users. So let's say 10, and I'll save it and I will rerun it. That will give us a good result to actually view it in a graph. So response time graph. Okay. So let me change the time interval and see. It's not working. So okay. Let's say I'll say ramp up period 10 seconds, and I'll say the number of users as 20. This will probably fetch us some good data. And I'll clear this, I'll run this, override existing file. Now the thing is we need to not use these listeners for actual load test, like view results tree, table, summary, report. These all listeners consumes a lot of memory. So we use these listeners to do our debugging whenever we are creating our test. Okay, so this got completed. Let me click on this display graph. So now see, we are able to see that this particular home page took a response time from this to this, around somewhere around 1300 something, and similarly features page took this much response time, and demo page took this much response time. So graphical representation. Now obviously if we want to write this into a file and all these details which we have mentioned before, and if we want to change the time format, x-axis, y-axis, we can do the changes accordingly here. Now the next listener is simple data writer. Okay, so this particular listener is just to write the data to a particular file. Okay, now I'll click on browse. On the desktop I've already created a results for one of the listeners, so I'll just write this as a simple data writer. So I'll write sdw results. So if you already have a file created, it's good. If you do not, you just write this thing here and it will give you the error, but that's fine. It will create once you'll run this request. So I'll clear this and I'll run. This will create a file called sdwresults.csv. So let's get this request completed. Okay, so we will look for this particular. So here, see, this file got generated. I'll right click, I'll open it. So see, here we are getting all the details displayed here. Okay, let's move to the next listener. So there's one listener called generate summary results. This listener is usually used when we are doing batch execution. So basically it displays the results in the command line. So since we were running a lot of requests and this listener was already added, and when you open your JMeter, your this command line thing will be always open, right, when your tool is there. So here you'll be able to see all these details. See, generate summary results, and it will give the details like average time, minimum time, maximum time, error percentage, and all those things, whatever active, started, finished. So since this was already added, I was able to see all these results here. This majorly covers most of the listeners available here. There are a few other listeners which I have not covered, which are a little bit more advanced. These listeners can be used for debugging. Most of these listeners are very memory consuming and time consuming. So we just use it when we are building the test plan, not when we are executing it. So obviously when we are executing our test plan, we should not use the GUI mode and we should execute it using the command line. I'll be covering how to execute your test using command line in future sessions. Please do like, share and subscribe in case you find this helpful in any way. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Bye bye.